Hi, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Danya Williams. It is a hot, muggy day here in the Washington, D.C. area. I tell you.
Steamy is the adjective that springs to mind. But as always, thank you so much for spending the next hour with us, however you're tuning in.
Yes.
Um, and we have quite the discussion that we're going to have. And for those of you who are following us on either YouTube or Facebook Live, we'd love to field your questions or post your comments about today's topic. Hope you're all well, and also happy Fourth, and enjoy. If you're celebrating the long weekends, we both of us, we wish you a joyous, happy weekend.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Mhm.
So I want to say this before we go any further. Today's topic is not necessarily genealogy based. Today's topic, what I mean by not necessarily genealogy based, is not like we're talking about how to research someone or anything like that. And we've had shows like this before, but this one is particularly deep. And I say that because on the heels of the affirmative action being cut off. So
Mhm. And
we're going into a conversation about the rollback and
mhm.
what's actually going on in this world today.
And I'm going to say, for the audience who's followed us for all 6 seasons, they know that we do a great job linking history to things that are happening today, how they may or may not impact genealogists of the future, trying to research what's happening today. Always wondering, because I always did wonder in the Civil War, what were my ancestors thinking during the time? You just always have those big social upheavals in American history or any country's history. You're bound to wonder, how did it affect my ancestors, the family, their loved ones, all of those kind of things. And what I love about us is the way that we have those conversations, because we've been doing research for so long, and both of us doing deep research in the same place. We have names. It's like, what would John Yeldell think of this, or what would I can't think of Mr. Harrison's first name. Essex. What would Essex Harrison think of this, or Martha Good, or any of the litany of, they didn't need to be our direct ancestors. They were our family, part of our extended family member. These are people that we, spend a lot of time researching. And we see the parallels.
In saying that names and calling out those names, now the name that I cannot think of, but I know what his issue was, and I would love to know how this particular man, how he thought about things. This was the man that was lynched in, I believe, Abbeville, and he was a well-to-do black man.
Mhm.
He was in either in Abbeville or Lawrence. I would love to hear his side, to hear his thoughts on this for two reasons. Number one, back then they were Republicans. They were Republicans. And so I wonder, would their thought process change like those did change? Because that is the thing that people need to realize. There was a switch in the parties.
Mhm.
So
And again, I would love to know what my paternal grandmother would think of what's happening today and what's happened to the Republican Party. Because we have her voter registration card, right? The election before Kennedy ran, and she was a card-carrying member of the Republican Party.
yeah,
Apparently a proud card-carrying member of the Republican Party,
that's
but
right.
she switched when the party's ideologies switched, and the kind of racist. I'm not saying that all the racist elements left the Democratic Party. I'm not that naive or that foolish, but when a lot of it left and went to what's now the Republican Party, um, that must have broken her heart. And I would imagine to see how much further down the road the Republican Party has gone would upset her even more. As a matter of fact, I don't think that any of my black relatives, and this is my immediate family of that generation, I don't think any of them started off as Democrats. But it's funny because they all ended up as Democrats. Every last one of them.
And it's nobody. I mean, one of the things that gets me is that when you're talking about Democrats and Republicans, you have some people who make the comment, "Oh, Republicans are well, it was the Democrats that actually enslaved." Let's be clear
Mhm.
on some things. Let's be clear and direct, and I'm gonna be as clear and direct on this as possible. Every last person during that time was racist. Every last person during that time had a thought process of what they felt the Black race should be doing. Some was
Well, okay, I'm going to qualify that a bit because I'm always nervous when people say everyone, no one, always, never. Not everyone was, because we know that there were Quakers and we know that there were abolitionists and people speaking out against slavery and treatment of Black people. I think there's a larger percent of the population that stayed silent. Now, I don't agree with their silence. I think, if they really agreed, that kind of, I'm not going to say it's a uniquely American thing, but there is a thing, I guess, with human beings. If it doesn't affect me directly, not my business. I don't really care what happens one way or another. Or that's the kind of persona that they present. I just wanted to offer that
I
clarification.
mean, and I think that, and instead, I think that should be that, and I'm not going to agree with that because back then they had to fight for everything that they was doing, and I think the real JC, whose comment is up there right now, is two different wings of the same bird. I get it. I like what he said in saying that, and just in my opinion, I think that everybody had a certain thing that they wanted to do, and back then they didn't have a problem fighting for what they needed because they needed everything during that time. So were there people sitting silently? Yes, there were, but I don't think it was as many as it is today. I think everybody sits silently now, and they just allow Congress to all of the let me not say Congress, just allow all of the executive branches to handle it. They don't realize that we control that.
Mhm.
I think all of that has been forgotten. I think that has really been forgotten, that we really do control this. And if the founding fathers didn't do anything right, if you felt like they didn't do anything right, that was the one thing that they definitely did right, was the fact that we control what's going on. But you
Well,
got people that don't vote,
mhm.
you know,
But it's interesting that you say that though, because I've always kind of believed that as horrible as the experience was, that may be one of the reasons why COVID happened. Because always remember, when non-white people speak out against the injustice and oppression that they experience in the United States, you're exaggerating. It's not that our words are never believed. Never believed. You can put the receipts on the table, not believed. It was the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and then George Floyd and then Breonna Taylor, when people were stuck at home watching a lot of television and catching a lot of news, that people's eyes started to open. Because there really was that rainbow coalition of outrage that came out as a result of that.
I think, I got into when George Floyd was murdered. I actually, I would look at different things and I would read different people's comments and things of that nature. And there was this one comment by this one person, and she was just really, really like, yeah, it was bad and he did this. I just don't understand why people are going off the way that they are. Well, I wasn't gonna let that slide. Y'all know my mouth. But again, I went in, and when I went in in oh, I know what it was about. It was actually about This Is Us. And the This Is Us show decided to talk about it. And when the This Is Us show decided to talk about it, the people on the This Is Us Facebook page just got livid. And they was like, they shouldn't do that and this, that, and the third, and this doesn't have anything to do with them and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, first of all, This Is Us is real. It's supposed to be about a real life thing that's happening. You watching these people grow from from children on up, and watching their mom and see how their dad died, and they're talking about life and how that life is affecting them in one way or another. And I think This Is Us was probably one of the best shows that you could have put that on, because this was a Black man surrounded by a white person's world, but they loved him. They loved him. They loved everything about him. But when this George Floyd incident happened, all that anybody could ever do was say, I'm sorry. They had to see where we were coming from and how we were feeling. And I think that show really did that and really pointed that out. And the lady was like, it didn't have anything to do, with they're calling it this and they're calling it a lynching. And I was like, ma'am, have you ever seen the faces of a lynching? Have you ever seen him? This man's face, eyes bulged. He foamed at the mouth. Everything that happened to him, be it on the ground, it was the same thing that would be happening if he was hanging. When I said that to her, she shut up. I'm not a rude person. Y'all know I'm not. But I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to let you say certain things and I give you a perfect example of nothing. So yes, I posted a picture of a bulging-eyed man being lynched. Not only did I post a picture of a bulging-eyed man being lynched, I posted a picture of a Black and a white bulging-eyed man being lynched. So let's be clear. It didn't just happen to Black people. It happened mostly to Black people. But I posted it so she could get the feeling of what it is that I'm talking about. You understand what I'm saying? This whole thing, the rollbacks that are happening right now, I have seen them coming for years.
Okay, so holding that thought, because I just want to put this into kind of a historical perspective. So we've had a series of Supreme Court decisions, starting with Dobbs, and then then we had the affirmative action for university, and then right after that, the wedding cake LGBTQ type thing. So when we're referring to like the rollback, those are the three big things that we're going to be talking about. And I want to take the affirmative action one first, because Clarence Thomas said something in his decision that, and he says it out loud, that just blew my mind, saying that the Constitution, the United States Constitution, was colorblind. Now he's parroting words that are coming out of the far right, the extreme right, anyway. And I'm like, how can you be a sitting United States Supreme Court justice and not understand how this country worked in the past and how it works today? Then I sent Donnie a link to some articles and whatnot that we're going to reference in the show. And again, this misinformation was being spewed that free people of color were equal to white people. And I just want to start with just how uncolorblind the Constitution was using free people of color. So I'm going to start with Spanish-held territory in the United States, because that's some of the oldest colonized parts of what would become this country. St. Augustine in Florida, founded 1565. Everywhere that the Spanish went, African descended people went, or people of mixed ancestry who were Iberian, Native American, indigenous, and African. The Spanish have documented this, so it's uncontrovertible. St. Augustine, Florida, 1565, there were African and African descended people in St. Augustine at that time. Becomes a United States state in 1821. The lives of free people of color in Florida changed overnight. They actually had more freedoms and liberties and rights under the Spanish than they did under the United States government. So from 1821, United States citizens, free people of color, owned property, they owned homes, they owned land. They paid their taxes. Guess what they couldn't do? They couldn't vote. They couldn't vote until 1870 with the 15th Amendment. So 1821 to 1870, taxation without representation. Louisiana starts off in around 1763. That becomes an American state. Its free people of color population, their the reality of their lived experience changed overnight. I'm not saying the French were, we know how the French and slavery were pretty brutal, but free people of color still had more freedoms under the French than they did with the Americans. California, 1769, first colony in San Diego, Black people were there. New Mexico, the region around New Mexico, 1598, documented Africans and mixed African people, 1598. 1848 becomes part of the United States. They can't vote. Texas, this one blew my mind. Texas was more or less settled by the Spanish starting in the 1680s. 1848 becomes a state. Free Black people, their lived experience changed overnight. French held territories, 1620s. There were Black people throughout their territory as well. Then we have the Africans who arrived in in Virginia in 1619. They start liberating themselves out of their bonds. I'd probably say the late 1620s, 1630s, they own property, and I'm a descendant of many of them. I've spent, along with Rick Murphy and Shelley Murphy and so many others, have spent decades researching our free people of color ancestors who go back to these people. They owned land. Sometimes they owned multiple properties, the ones who were more affluent. But they owned land, they paid their taxes. Guess what? None of these free Black people could do until 1870. They couldn't vote. Couldn't vote. We fought a revolution over this. Many of these people, especially in Virginia and other parts in the 13 colonies, they fought this. This is a thought bubble that hit me today that infuriated me. Thousands of Black men fought in the American Revolution or provided aid or assistance of some description. These were free men of color or men who had been enslaved and escaped. They fought. Some of them got bounty land, some of them didn't. When they did get bounty land, sometimes it wasn't the best land to be given, but as we always do, they made the best with what they had. They heard the words, they were fighting for freedom and liberty from the British with their white counterparts, got different rewards at the end of it. And guess what they couldn't do? They couldn't vote. But they still did it.
You're not talking about affirmative action right now. You're more on the voting rights system. You said affirmative action. So the thing about the voting, I think, and I love how you put the dates in and all of that. And the fact of the matter is we've always been fighting for these things. And basically what you've just done is pulled how many times we had to fight for this particular thing. But the one thing that you did leave out, and I know you didn't necessarily leave it out on purpose, but you're going by the facts that are laid in front of you, is that women was never included in what you're talking about.
No, they were not.
Women are never included in those things. And then, so when women did start to do those things, one of my favorite is as far as the whole women and the right to vote thing. You had African American women walking side by side with white women to get this right to vote. And they looking at these same women telling them, oh yeah, we need you. And then when you use us to get what you want, oh, but it's not your turn yet for Black women. But yet you want to turn around and you want to put Harriet Tubman on a Susan B. Anthony or a $20 bill in order to celebrate the fact of women voting. Please note and remember that celebration of women voting did not include Black women. It never included Black women. We were not a part of that celebration.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the whole Kennedy issue in the sixth, and the bill that Lyndon B. Johnson finally signed for the civil rights movement, that we all, both black men, black women, people of color, were now able to vote. That's when it happened, because it was snatched away from us even when we were able to. Several times over, just like you said it, our black men, they could now, one minute they had it, next minute they didn't. They fought for it, they got it, then they didn't again. There are other dates that you put in there. They talk about the Supreme Court taking away civil rights, and they declined civil rights in 1883. So you have different times that the right to vote has been challenged and the voting has been challenged, and they go about challenging it all the time in different ways. And now they're doing it by changing, the lines, and it's yeah.
Now, the other three things is we have three civil rights amendments. There's the 13th Amendment, 1865, slavery ends, people who were enslaved are free. 1868, that was I call that the equal protection under the law, civil rights protection, which was kind of an extension of the Bill of Rights, but this time to people who weren't white men. Still, women were excluded from that. I do take Doniga's point. 1868 applied more to non-white men than it did to women. Interestingly, the 14th Amendment is also one that says, well, if you were an insurrectionist, you can't serve in public office, you can't run for office, and you can't be in the military. So that's part of that very interesting amendment. And then you have the 1870, which I call the kind of Voting Rights Act. I'm not going to get into the depth of how amendments become part of the Constitution, but I'm just gonna put this out there for people who are perhaps a bit skeptical of what I'm saying. We had three civil rights amendments between 1865 and 1870. And it's not like the Congress of the day didn't have some fundamentally real issues to contend with. It's not like all these members sitting around going, you know what, it's kind of a slow legislative season. Let's just come up with some amendments to the Constitution just to kind of fill our day, and just for laughs and giggles. Let's do it, because two-thirds of the states have to pass these things for them to actually become amendments to the Constitution. So with all of that work and all of that passion to pass three 19th century civil rights amendments means that there must have been some issues going on that the first two amendments didn't address. Obviously, the first one ended slavery, so that's always going to be a standalone. But something must have been happening around 1868 to say, you know what? Now these free, formerly enslaved people and all Black people need equal protection under the law.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, if they're still talking about voting rights in 1870, well, that kind of tells me, using common sense, Black people must have been having problems voting. And it's easy enough to Google Scholar, loads of wonderful articles, peer-reviewed articles. And that's when someone publishes something, other academics kind of weighed in, going, you're right here, not really sure about your points here. And, they openly, or they just say that this is just bunk. But the thing is, it's peer-reviewed. It is discussed, it's challenged, it's revised, tweaked, whatever. Google Scholar, awesome place to learn about American history. And again, it's just being intellectually curious. Amendments don't go into the US Constitution willy-nilly. There is a reason for each and every one of them, and it just takes a little bit of research from reliable, respected, verified sources, and that's not Breitbart, to go in it, to read and to learn from. And it frustrates me that not enough of that's being done.
Brian, you did have to.
Uh-oh, what did I do? Did I curse?
You said that's not Breitbart. The thing is, because even with Breitbart, you got people, in my opinion, as even with Breitbart, yeah, you got those that just really, they say some stupid stuff. They come out their mouth with some things, but sometimes they actually believe it to be right because it was what was taught to them. So we have to be, open and honest when it comes to that. Even when, it's just like any book a person can read. I can read a book and I can give my interpretation of it. And you could turn around and read the same book and give a totally different interpretation. So I think it's more so they're looking at the Constitution and they're giving their own interpretation of it. No matter whether or not that interpretation just don't make any sense in some instances, the bottom line is that's what it is.
I take your point, but I'm going to disagree in as much as when they're saying that the Constitution is colorblind, and it clearly isn't, and then they come out with nonsense, and people from the other far right media and politicians come out with nonsense about how the Three-Fifths Amendment in the U.S. Constitution was in no way a racist provision.
Listen, I'm in total agreement with you when it comes to that. But if they're trying to make it fit their agenda, then yes, they're going to interpret it differently. They're going to look at it in a different way. So let's talk about that. The 3/5 thing. Being able to vote. I know that every specifically Black person up here, but I don't know how many of our Caucasian family members we have today, but we all have heard of the fact that we weren't even thought of. It took 5 men to make one of us during a certain time period in history. Okay. That was that 3/5 compromise. That's what he was talking about. Now, the thing about that, this particular article that he's talking about was the article called Defending the Constitution. The 3/5 compromise was not based on racism. If you don't know, let me tell you right now, that compromise came about because of the fact that the South felt like they were not being represented properly. So basically, they needed more bodies to be able to be counted and have an equal amount of representatives in Congress. Who were those bodies? African Americans who were enslaved. And it took 5 for every 5 of them, that person counted as one. That's what the 3/5 compromise is. It states that very clearly in the Constitution. This is what Brian is talking about. You can't really interpret it any other way. But that's what it states. So if it states that very clearly like that, guys, how is that not based on racism? Because the only time that you thought about people as people was when you needed them. That was it. Otherwise, they were property at first. This is why we research today. This is why we try to pull people to understand that those same folks that you thought of as property have descendants, just like your people have descendants. Therefore, they are people too.
Now, the other argument that the far right is using is that because specific races are not mentioned in the Constitution, that also makes it colorblind. Well, there was only one group of people who were considered 3/5 of human beings. That was African Americans. There was only one group of people that prompted the Fugitive Slave Act.
That was African Americans.
Because again, indentured servants and apprentices were not enslaved. Their servitude had a guaranteed expiration date.
Yeah.
It did. Even for free people of color, their apprenticeships had an end date. Yep. Usually it was an age, somewhere between 28 to 32. I can never really remember what the exact age was, but there was an age. By this age, you're done. You can live your life.
Yep.
Did not apply to slaves.
That's right.
So
and
I don't want people.
It didn't apply to slaves because when you sit and you read those wills and you read in there that so and so that Jane will be passed on to my wife along with her increase. Increase is her children. That's what her increase. So these babies not even born yet, and you've already putting them into slavery. And just in case she decides to have a kid, they're gonna be enslaved too. That's what that said. So to interpret that in a manner in which you're saying that this is, it's not racist, y'all miss me with that. Miss me. I'm trying my best not to curse today. I need y'all to know that, because this right here, this whole thing is just crazy. Like, now, moving on to affirmative action.
Oh, sorry, because I just want to make one point.
Oh, okay.
Think about the people, think about the men who wrote these documents, the Bill of Rights, the uh, Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. They were white men. They were thinking about themselves. They were thinking about white landowners. That's all they were concerned about when they actually sat down to write
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
they
even
didn't
even
think about their white women. Let's be
no,
clear on
no,
that.
they
Yeah,
didn't even do white women at all.
yeah,
So why would, if you weren't a white male landowner who the Constitution wasn't intended for, and again, that impacted poor white people too,
yeah.
let me say. But moving on, they're not going to make a specific provision for you because you didn't matter. You were not on their radar. They were your, they lorded it over you. And that's just the way the society was. And we have a constitution that reflects that.
That, yeah,
Um,
that's why amendments came to pass.
yes, that's why
That
we have
is
amendments.
that is
So
why
if,
we have amendments, because they knew that at the very beginning it was really set up for a specific type and of people, and that was it. It wasn't. I'm not, and don't get me wrong. I love my country. I don't think, I don't, I personally don't feel like there's a better place for me to be. And that's it. My families are from here. I am very much entrenched into the history of, of America, and I love it. But don't lie. Stop lying. That's just the bottom line. Stop lying. You
well,
gotta stop.
it's what I said to you on the phone today. The reason why I get so, the reason why my country, the country of my birth, breaks my heart all the time is it has yet to live up to its potential to show the rest of the world how a country filled with disparate people from different ethnicities, with ancestry from all over the world, different religious beliefs, different, obviously there's different genders, but different religious beliefs, different, whether they believe in religion at all, different socioeconomic statuses, just different beliefs, different ethnicities, different customs, should be able to come together and who may, have different ways of loving other human beings. There's no reason why we all can't, 330 plus million of us, just come together as a nation and live peaceably with one another. Because I think what you and I are both saying is, when we're fighting for our rights, we're fighting for everyone's rights, and we're not looking to take anything away from a specific group of people. We're just saying, be fair, everyone's equal. Everyone, you can go on and live your life.
But there are some, Brian, that's not fighting for everyone. And that is in every nationality. That is in every race. It is, I mean, at this point, black people, you have some black people that don't care about nobody else but their own. And they like that because of the stuff that went on, you know, because of the things that has happened with us and through us and to us. So that's why they like that. They like, you know what? I could care less about everybody else. My concern is the people that come in this shade. I ain't tripping off of nobody else. That's my concern. But then you have others who are like, oh yeah, we're fighting for all of you, but they only fight for all of us when they need us to be a part of it. Because when the Chinese got their Protection Act, it's Asian American, not Chinese. I think it was Asian American, so it was all. They got their Protection Act within like what, a 2-year period, and we still fighting for one for us. Where you at? Where are you now? Where are you? Where are you for us? Why is it so hard to be there for Black people, but you constantly want Black people to be there for you. And the bad part about it is, and I hate to say bad, but the bad part about it is that we are always there. We are always there. We're part of probably one of the most loving group of people that you could ever come across. And you continuously cross us. It's continuous. Like I got on my Boondock shirt because I'm feeling a certain way today, y'all. Like, it's everything about what's going on in the US today is just it's coming back. And if you didn't believe me then when I said, then I need you to believe me now, because it's now showing, and you got to do your part to stop it. It can still be stopped, but we all have to do our part to stop it. So affirmative action has now been rolled away. This means that African Americans that were once able to get in, this is one of the rulings, okay? This is part of the ruling. African Americans, they used to be able to get into Ivy League schools such as Harvard, Yale, Brown, places like that, Princeton. They now cannot get in because of their race or because those schools have to meet a quota. However, this does not include military schools. I'm going to let that sink in. This does not include military schools. So you want us to go and you want us to fight into your military, and that it counts there. But when you want your child to get a really, really good education, they got to get in on their own merits. And this does not include white families who have legacies that get into these schools simply because their great-great-granddaddy went there or they paid. What you not, look, okay.
Actually, if I can just stop you there for a hot second. Legacy enrollment, and that can happen a couple of different ways. Either a parent or an ancestor gave a massive endowment to a university who built a building normally named after that ancestor, or a family member who's donated huge sums of money to a university or a college. That's another form of affirmative action.
Yeah.
So if you can't level the playing field for minorities, and specifically for minorities, I'm going to give it who's come from underfunded school systems where the educational experience isn't that, it's just more difficult. There's more barriers. There's more challenges. That was the other reason why affirmative action was put into place, to counter that, to try to level that disparate, unfair playing field. So if you're going to get rid of what helped non-Caucasian people get into universities, and in this case specifically African Americans, well, you got to get rid of legacy enrollment. That's that is the only way to make that a fair playing field. Everyone who applies should be judged on their merits.
That's it. But that's not going to happen. That's not included in that Constitution. I mean, in that ruling through the Supreme Court. That is not included. It just, it's not. I find it heartbreaking that we have to keep going through these things over and over and over and over again. And what everybody needs to realize is that they want you to stay dumb about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to stay dumb about this stuff. They don't want you to research. They don't want you to go. This is the equivalent of put it in a book and nobody will never know anything about it. It ain't even in a book no more now. It's on the internet and y'all still not doing the research. You still not reading.
And part of what's motivating, I know you're going to feel the same way. You'll speak your own words about it. What motivates me to have an episode like this is when I go to meet my maker and I go to meet the ancestors, and I'm not, I'm not going to lie. I kind of have that kind of Wakanda image in my head of meeting the ancestors. But when I go to meet the ancestors and they ask me the question, what did you do when all of this was going on? I spoke out. I spoke out. I wrote. I tried. I tried to do my bit.
And that's the part. That's the part, because they did so much. Y'all. we would not be here. We would not be here if they did not do the things that they do. I know these youngins out here, and I know I'm sounding like really ghetto, but I'm sorry. I I know they I know these young kids out here today, they're like, oh, I'm not my ancestors. Sir, you want to be, ma'am, you want to be them, because you would have never been able to be as strong or take what they took just for you. There's a video of one guy who's talking to a racist police officer, and he looks at him and he tells him, will you pray with me? Now, everybody don't believe in God. I get all that, whatever. But the fact that he came to him and did that, do y'all know that this man said, no, I will not pray with you? This Christian, because he asked him first, are you a Christian? Do you believe in God? Yes, I do. And you're a Christian, you're a Christian man. Yes, I am. Well, then will you pray with me? No, because I don't think your prayers get above your head. But you're a Christian man. If you're a Christian man, then help my prayers move. You understand what I'm saying? Y'all would never, I would never. I'm going to tell y'all how I thank the Lord every single day of the timing that I was born. The timing that I was born was more perfect than anything. Because who I am, who I turned out to be, I would have never been her. Because back then, what started me on my fight crusade was my nephew. You got one time to touch one of my niece's nephews' children, and you talking about children, you got one time to touch one of my nieces and nephews. I'm going to hell and back for them. I got them. I told them, each one of them, when they were born, I told them, I don't care if your parents made you mad. Call me. I got them. Mm-hmm. I'm going for the parent. And the parent is my sibling. But you could ask any one of my nieces and nephews, did I say that to them? Because I meant it. Because they mean everything to me. Mm-hmm. My nieces and nephews mean everything to me. And then you got children on the street. They mean so much to me. Lady was walking and the baby's carriage got away, and I caught it right before another car was about to hit it. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, man, I'll get her hit first before your kid do. You believe that? Mm-hmm. And I meant it. But we're not there. We're not there.
And I want to take this comment from a viewer. So he says, rollback of civil rights, that depends on which rights you're talking about. The rollback of one right that's especially settled law is one too many. And for us, that's the Supreme Court. We haven't even discussed what's going on at state level with voter rights suppression. I don't want to get into it because we've had so many shows about voter rights suppression that people can check out, but that's another one. And if people think that they're listen, this activist Supreme Court has got the bit in the teeth now. They know that they can get away with doing this stuff because there's just not that volume of outcry that, in my opinion, there should be. If you think they're going to stop with women on reproductive rights, you have another thing coming. They are wedded to turning back the clock to a pre-1950s existence. And I really don't want to be sitting here a decade from now kind of saying, I told you so, when women find themselves unable to work except in very limited capacities and are stuck at home and expected to just make babies.
I'm saying it. I'm saying it now. I told you. I feel like the man from Independence Day, he kept talking about the aliens was coming, and he was like, y'all didn't believe me, but I told you. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you right at this particular moment, I've been talking about the changes since I don't know how long now. I can tell you when, since I started digging into my boy Preston Brooks, and I started reading his stuff. Now, our cousin Yolanda, she put something up here on her, and I didn't post it up yet because I kind of believe it too. Yolanda is technically, she's a Brooks descendant. And she said the Constitution needs to be burned and rewritten because it is not for us. It doesn't help us. It only helps white Americans only. Now, for those that's getting ready to catch an attitude with what she just said, I need to clarify something. Again, I'm gonna go back to it again. The Constitution was written by white men, and it was for white men during that time.
And not even all white men.
Huh?
And not even all white men.
Right. It was just for those elitist type ones. Now, in saying that, Preston Brooks was a white man, and he was an elitist white man, and he made those same words. He said that, but he said that for a totally different reason. He said that because the Civil War was coming through, it was coming to. And he was like, I've been a disunionist since the day I was born, and I will be one till the day I die. He also made the comment, you could take the Constitution and put it underfoot. So before y'all start coming for my cousin making that comment, and for myself agreeing with it, you need to go for the son of South Carolina, because he said it first.
And again, some of it, in my opinion, is straightforward. Replace all men are created equal with all people are created equal. Let's just start with that one. And get out all the racist stuff that's in there. There's no need for that to be in there. And which reminds me, because I kind of blew your mind this morning when I made this comment. I reread that bit about the 13th Amendment that ended chattel slavery based on race. They didn't end chattel slavery. They didn't make it illegal forever. What I'm trying to say is, if you really read the language that's in there, it's specific. Race-based chattel slavery is to be no more. That doesn't mean that some clever policy can't sit there and work out a new way to enslave Americans.
That's right. That's right. So
There isn't.
if you want to talk about, what slavery is, or y'all need to go and read the Constitution. Like, it's not a hard read. It's actually very clear. It's really not a hard read. It's not a hard read at all. And after this, I'm giving some time for people to read this particular comment by Kay Carey. But after her comment, I'm gonna post one by one of our other listeners and onlookers, Miss Ann's, because she's making a statement. But the thing is that they've always been the minority. This is not them now getting the taste of it. The bottom line is that's why they voted. That's why they fought for their voting rights, because they were always the minority. They're minorities too, and it mattered then to them. But now it's a whole. This whole thing is now is going deeper, and I need for people to stand up and get up and do what needs to be done. I don't care if you have to relearn how the three powers work, the executive, judiciary, and governing bank. I don't care what you have to do to understand how these things work. Reread it, do it, understand it, study it, teach it to your kids, because right at this moment, it is the most important thing that will stop and save and help what's going on in this world today. My cousin Samantha.
And take that to the state level, because people dismiss state elections. State elections have consequences as much, if not more so, than federal elections.
Local, take it all the way.
To the dog catcher.
Take it to if you gotta elect the dog catcher, make sure he is one that believes in humane treatment of those dogs. Don't just be putting anybody out there.
Well, and also believes in democracy, but that's
right. I mean, I'm just saying.
I know.
Don't just say, oh, anybody can be the dog catcher. No, anybody cannot be the dog catcher. You got to be mindful of what you're putting in this office. We put them there. And to be honest and even more frank with you, we put them more in local and state than we do in federal, because federal is controlled. That is a controlled thing. So whatever we putting in local and state, it's going to affect the federal. So we got to make sure we're doing it right on those bottom levels so it can be done right at the top. That's the part that people, oh Lord, that's what we need to just understand, and we need to get through, and we need to get. And as I know that you were being sarcastic, and I'm sorry if you took it a little bit differently, but unfortunately, there are people out here that actually don't get it. And that's who we're trying to talk to. Even though I know on our YouTube and our Facebook pages, we have people, you guys are probably some of the most brightest people that we've ever had, that we know of. But you got to remember, our show also airs online. It airs on a TV network. And so this is something that they might not be getting in their schooling. That's why we be so precise on what it is that we do. That's why we try to make sure we tell people, go to the YouTube page, go to the Facebook page, click on the links that we provide. And we are going to provide to you links to some of these articles that we're talking about so that they can then read them. You need to start reading. Go to the Constitution and read it. I know it ain't that bad. It's not. It really isn't. It's not that bad.
And can I just say, vote. Even if you don't think that your vote counts, even if you think that your vote's not going to change anything, register and vote. Because part of the reason why we're in this mess is the largest voting segment of this nation are non-voters. They just stay out of it altogether.
They just stay out.
So vote. I mean, I hate to say it sounds cynical. I mean, we need to hold our elected officials accountable for their campaign promises. If they campaign to say X, they better deliver X. I'm going to let a president slightly off the hook because if they're faced, if they're one party and then they're faced with opposition from another party, especially if you're a Democrat and you're facing Republicans, you can't always get what you want. And you have to, again, as Donia was saying, understand how government works. Because it still kind of amazes me. We say the American president is the most powerful person on the earth. And in some respects they are, because they do, they are the commander in chief of the largest military army, service people the world has ever seen. But on the other hand, they have their powers checked. Congress can check their powers. The Supreme Court can check their powers. They can't do everything that they want to do.
That's right. They are checked. And it's supposed to be all three supposed to be able to check each other.
Can you memo that over to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, well, I think, but the Supreme Court is the final. That's the final. That's when it ends. One of the things that that President Biden was trying to do was help with the debt for students who can't afford because of, and that's been, they told him, no, he can't do it. It can't be done. So immediately they started setting up other programs to be able to help people pay these bills off and get that done. But yeah, you knocking this man on the things that he's trying to do. First of all, when let's take it back to Obama. You had a lot of people that just felt like Obama did not do things. I need you to understand that even though the Democratic Party wanted Obama in, there were people within that ranks that did not want him there, and they fought against him. This was somebody that even had at one point had control over both House and Senate, and he was still losing stuff. That's because they didn't agree with him. They didn't want him there, but they knew that was the one that was going to win. That's what it is in federal. But state, they got to follow suit on what we tell them to do. So when you start looking at your voting and your local, make them people do what they supposed to do.
And call them out when they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, like this whole book pulling, book censoring, book banning nonsense. If there was nothing to be afraid of, you wouldn't be banning books. If there was nothing to genuinely be afraid of, there's no reason to hide books. Take them off the shelves.
That's right.
You can't have it both ways. You can't say that this isn't an issue. Oh, but I don't want my child reading about the issue that's not an issue.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. It's crazy. Do you know this album is up?
Get out. Oh, wow. It is.
Good Lord. That happened so quickly. But I mean, all I just want y'all to really just, get out there, talk to your kids. If you got to start with them, these are 18-year-olds out here. They on another level. They sadly are right where the civil rights movement was kicking in. That's where they are. We are back to that. If you didn't know, let me give you a date of where we are. I'm gonna give you a time period of where we are. Did you look at the photo that Brian put up? That's where we are. We are back to civil rights marching, walking, sit-ins, all that stuff. That's where we are. And that stuff happened well before the 60s. They've been doing it long. They were doing it long before the 60s. I had an uncle who his name was John Carlton Yeldale, J. Carlton, because he went by J. Carlton. J. Carlton Yeldale. He was a part of the Black Congress. Yes, the Negro Black Congress. And he was a part of that, and they called him a fascist because of that particular thing, when all they were really trying to do was make stuff equal for everybody. That was created in the late 30s, I think, right when my mom was born. So in 1939. It was created back then, and he was a part of it. And it was created at Howard University.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why there was a question mark for the future, I don't know how all this is going to end. I don't think anyone, unless the real majority of Americans stand shoulder to shoulder and say enough is enough, no, and draw a line under the sand, say get back in your box. I don't even want to think about what the future holds. I really, really don't. And I'm not entirely confident that enough of the real majority of America is actually prepared to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the only thing that I can say at this ending part, as far as affirmative action is concerned, hopefully it will make some type of dent for HBCUs. Hopefully these these students will start really going to these HBCUs and making this funding work the way it should. And one of the HBCUs that I want people to attend, and this may sound funny that I'm not saying my school, because yes, of course I want people to attend Jackson State University and all of that. But I want y'all to go to Bluefield State, because Bluefield State right now in West Virginia is receiving monies as an HBCU, but it is a predominantly white institution. I'm in with that.
100% and 100% correct in that comment.
Yeah. So with that being said, I want you guys to have an awesome day. This show went extremely fast.
It did. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. I know we've given you a lot to kind of chew on and think over.
We did.
But as always, we will be right back at you next Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in all the usual places.
Yes. So with that being said, I'm Danya.
I'm Brian.
And I
enjoy the rest.
Have a great day.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.